As early as 1984, we all knew that Porsche was up to something in the supercar world because we'd seen the concept Group B 959. They promised a car by 1985, but actually it wasn't until 1987 that people took delivery of theirs. In fact, this one here, one of the 12 UK cars, arrived here in 1987, and it is, in white, quite stunning. Now, first of all, I probably have to acknowledge that 288 GTO versus 959 isn't a fair comparison because the GTO was launched in 85, this car's 2 years later, and by the time the 959 hit the road, we all know that something called the F40 had arrived with 478 horsepower. But conceptually, the cars were always completely different. Whereas the GTO and the F40 were very much racing cars for the road, the 959 was a technology exercise. And actually, I think, looking back now, it was the braver of the three cars. It's just the most outrageous representation of the 911 on the road. You sit in it and it feels like a 911. It is ostensibly a 911. The glasshouse is the same shape, but it had 450 horsepower and 369 foot-pounds of torque. It weighed 1,450 kilograms, and at the same time, in that period, a Carrera had 231 horsepower. We couldn't believe how fast it was. Claimed top speed was 315 clicks, 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds. Even now it feels rocket ship fast. So as I said, the fundamental difference here between the Ferrari and the Porsche is the Porsche was designed to feel and drive like a totally finished production car. Look at this enormous rear boot lid on gas struts. And the quality and the fit and the finish here it's like a modern production car. It's outrageous. Car had 450 horsepower. It's effectively a 962 engine in there, so it's water-cooled heads for the first time in a 911. There's some water cooling for the top of the engine and sequential turbochargers. So it's twin turbocharged, but the second turbocharger comes in at about 4,500 RPM, and that's the big one. It takes a while to spool up, and it is really exciting. It just flies. It feels like a sort of VTEC system almost, like it's on the cam. The quality of the car is outrageous. It was £145,000 in 1987, so go and get your inflation calculator out. That must be, what, £500,000 now? The 959 is exceptionally rare, and yet for all its glamour and its significance, it's actually not that valuable a car at the moment, and that's because it costs a fortune to keep them on the road. Those clever tyre pressure sensors and dampers, they're not easy to replace and they leak a bit. Leave it standing for a while, you could have a 30 grand bill just to keep it on the road. So maybe it's a slow burner and one for the future. I have to say, standing here right now, I'd really like one. It is stunning, absolutely stunning. And in white, like this, wow, just wow. There are many points of conjecture in the automotive world, but one of them, emphatically not, is that the 288 GTO is the best looking modern Ferrari, because, I'm afraid, girls and boys, it is. You can see why commentators back in the day couldn't quite work out or reconcile the Porsche's technology with the Ferrari's sheer emotion and lightweight appeal. Sitting in here now, this feels about as modern as a spinning jenny compared to the Porsche. There's a flocked dash, everything's very basic, but it smells, looks and feels absolutely perfect. I can understand why these are worth more than F40s now, it's just a more special car. Specification-wise, 400 horsepower from its twin-turbo V8 and 365 foot-pounds of torque. That last figure is quite interesting because if the Porsche's 369 and weighs 1,450 kilograms, this thing is 1160 dry, so let's say just over 1,200, maybe 1,230 kilograms wet, but it's got nearly as much torque as the Porsche. They're a bit of a hamper in the wet GTOs, and you can see why. Now, the differences between the Porsche and the Ferrari are almost perfectly defined in their boot lids. The Porsche's perfectly moulded piece of plastic rises on two gas struts. The Ferrari just has this thin piece of aluminium, two little screw-in clips here, a catch that pops up, and up it comes. Look at that. It's a totally different experience, a totally different experience. And underneath, there it is, twin-turbo V8, the motor's shoved a long way forward, gearbox behind it, these two great big intercoolers you remember from the photos back in period. And then, of course, there's so much gizzard available underneath. From behind the GTO, you're always seeing bits. It's almost semi-naked. Back in 1985, the Ferrari was actually a bit cheaper than the Porsche would be 18 months later. But now it's completely outstripped the Porsche in terms of value. These cars are knocking on for £500,000 now, whereas the Porsche is still probably in the 100s. Does it feel that it should be worth that much money? I think so. I think the market rightly acknowledges that the 288 GTO is one of the most special modern day Ferraris. It should be worth more than an F40, and this car is utterly, utterly beautiful. Right, first of all, before we start, Dickie, can we just discuss the driving position? Because I know it looks ridiculous, but I must be Italian because it fits me. It does. My legs are in the right place, and I can. And if it got really big on me, I'd be a bit over there somewhere, but it's fine.
No, it's good. These seats are very
lovely.
It's very special in here, isn't it?
Oh, come on. This is just fantastic.
Strong, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it rides so well too.
Yeah, this is, I suppose, having conventional suspension means it can actually be used properly without dampers going wrong. Oh, it's just lovely, and it doesn't feel small. It feels quite wide to me.
Yeah.
Gearbox is just lovely, and on boost, it goes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fast. One of these is a technical statement that even 24 years after it was built still seems quite preposterous in its numbers and performance. The 959 kind of stands the test of time, even if in certain areas you think to yourself that it's a bit too much technology over emotion. The other car though is just, well, one of the most sensational cars ever made. The 288 GTO wins the first episode of Ferrari versus Porsche for Evo because it is just one of the most captivating cars ever made.